Welcome to Three Principles Conversations with Christian McNeill, a series of conversations with Three Principles practitioners exploring a new explanation of how humans work. Insight into this understanding can help transform quality of life, relationships, and state of mind.
So, hello and welcome. Welcome to Three Principles Conversations with me, Christian McNeill. And today, my guest is Mary White from Minnesota, joining us all the way from there. And Mary White is a friend, but she's also a coach and a counsellor. And I'm really delighted to be having this conversation with Mary, and I have had a few conversations with you in the past in previous guises of this podcast. But yes, it's absolutely lovely that you're here today. And the purpose of the podcast is to really explore this thing called the Three Principles, to tell us a bit about your experience with it, and why would somebody want to spend time learning about it, or having coaching or counseling. So it's really just I'm very interested in making this more widely available, because it seems to me that an understanding of the three principles can really change people's lives. So so just to get right into it, um can you tell us a little bit about your take on what this three principles thing is, and how it helps people, and why they should um, get interested in it?
Oh, well, I only know from my own experience 30 some years ago when I was introduced to this understanding of how the mind works. And I had a very big insight right off the bat that that I've never come back from. I mean, I did a 180 and never came back. Now, that didn't mean that there wasn't some learning along the years. There's definitely been learning curves along the years, but and a deepening and a refining of my understanding, but or maybe you could say a purification of the understanding. But um, I guess why, you know, the reason I went into the mental health field, I wouldn't have even done that had I not found this for myself.
Yeah, and if I could just ask, just before you get into your next steps, could you put a little meat on the bones of that, of what your own experience was, what that 180 was?
Well, I was given some literature by my brother, who had also referred me to Mavis Karn in town here, and I was coming out of a really bad period of my life, and still not a happy camper. And I was reading something about the idea that we live in a thought-created reality, and I couldn't really figure out what the author was getting at, but I looked away and I came back and I read it again. I read it one sentence again, and all of a sudden it jumped out at me. And what occurred in my mind was, wow, so if all the angst and anxiety and insecurities and dysfunction in my mind are thought, and I'm the thinker, I'm thinking them, then I could not think it. And I know that sounds really odd. That's what it's taken me 30 years to be able to really describe this, but at the time, that's what occurred in my head. It was like, you mean I could not think it? And for some reason, what that opened up for me was a feeling of exhilaration and freedom. Not for some reason, it was an insight. It opened up a feeling of just pure freedom and exhilaration, and I cried for a long time. And that's all that I saw. And from that moment on, I couldn't take my habits that my thought habits that were interfering with my well-being. I couldn't take them as seriously. They were still fresh in my memory bank, but I just, they would come up and I'd be like, no. Now, again, this isn't like suddenly I was enlightened and walked on, walked in light beams after that, but that was a starting point, and it got my attention, and I went, wow. And people even noticed. like, what's different about you? But I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to explain it. So then I started working with Mavis, and I got more words for it and more understanding, and my insights just deepened, and new insights have happened over the years. But the difference between what I saw, so what got my attention was that was just an insight that popped up about the truth about how the mind works. And that was enough, with some mentoring to clear out years of, I completely got over my anxiety. Insecurities come and go sometimes, but not even close to where they were before. I found well-being that I hadn't experienced since I was a kid, probably like 5. And back then I was in my mid-30s. So that really got my attention. And that's when I decided I had to tell people about this, because people had told me many times over the years, and I had been through psychotherapy in my 20s, because I was a very troubled, and it didn't really help, but it was nice to have someone to talk to. But what people had told me was, oh, you have everything going for you. Oh, why are you worrying about that? Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. And I'd be like, yeah, I know. But I hadn't seen it as thought. I hadn't seen that my entire emotional suffering was thought created from start to finish. Yes, I'd had bad experiences in childhood. Yes, those were in my brain and informing my thinking and my thought. But yeah, I hadn't seen it at that level. And so today, 30 some years later, it's just the same answer. It's like it's the same insight but deeper and more certainty. That and why I'm in, now I'm in the mental health field, and I have been for some time. And when I talk to clients, I say, because they'll say, well, what is it that you do that's so different? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be talking about your feelings and your behaviors. I'll listen and we'll talk about anything, but I'm not going to be focusing on changing your feelings or changing your behaviors, or I'm going to be helping you understand the source of those, and until you have an insight. I'm going to be pointing you in the direction of having an insight about those, because that's what will create lasting change for you. Because what the principles offer is a complete understanding of how the mind works. We're not interested in the products of the mind. We're the product of the principles. We're interested in the mechanics, or the how of the mind. It's a very, very different orientation.
It absolutely is. And it occurs to me, I was just having this conversation with somebody else today, that some of the outcomes of having had an insight into how the mind works are, kind of like what you described, a freedom, a possibility, the hope of something different, more peace, all of these things. And to that extent, it could, if one focused only on the outcomes that individuals have, it could sound like other things, or it could sound like the kind of stuff that you read in an inspirational, book or morning meditation book or something like that. And it's not to diss that, but what's on offer here, it seems to be, is something much more rigorous and consistent, that if one gets it, um, more and more will be revealed, and that it's something very, very specific. It's not woolly. It's not about, it's all peace and love, man. That's in there, but that's not really, that's not really the difference that makes the difference, it seems to me.
That's right. And to your point about reading, these lovely, there's been people that have had epiphanies, enlightenment, and they write from, and it's in beautiful writings throughout the centuries, from, and they before I had my insight into how the mind works from the principles understanding, all of those felt very far away to me. Like, oh, that's nice, but that's their thing. How do I get that? Give it to me. How do you give it to me? or how do I get it? Well, you can't. Like you can't give away an insight. You can't give away wisdom. People have to. It has to come from within. So I've done a lot of reflection on Sydney Banks's insight and other people who've had enlightenment experiences throughout history. And I think they're pointing to the same thing. But what I love about the principles that he he dedicated his life to sharing this as best as he could and put it into words as best as he could, like mind, thought, and consciousness. That didn't happen automatically. That came later for him, from what I understand. But what I love about this is that it's a complete set, and they're elemental, and you can't reduce them anymore. They really describe in entirety how the human experience happens, and in a way that can be understood. So it doesn't have to be this mysterious, oh, I don't get it yet. I don't get I don't have it. I don't see where you're going with this, master. It gives it. What I love about this is that it just gives something. I'm not being very articulate today. I'm sorry. I, it's having actual principles that you can fall back on and talk from, if you really are talking from them, um, in the purity of the understanding, as a framework, is really helpful in orienting people towards towards having an insight.
Yeah. And of course, because these are true principles, by which we mean facts that are true for everybody all the time, in the same way, that rules of physics or chemistry, are, because they are true principles. One of the things that we have going for us as coaches or counselors or teachers is that all of this will already have been showing up in a client's life, even if they haven't noticed it or given it any weight or understood the significance of it. So we're always going to find examples, evidence of these principles in their history. I mean, it just can't not happen. Now, they may or may not have an insight, but we will find the evidence.
Right. Yeah, that's really a good point. And it's when I work with people, I just listen a lot in the beginning. I'll really listen, and then it naturally occurs to me how I can point something out, because we're using the principles. We're in the principles from birth to death. Whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, the experience isn't the thing. It's not, that's the outcome. That's after the fact. So we're always operating from the principles, whether we know it or not. And I mean, these could be called, I don't know, other things, I suppose, but just mind, thought, and consciousness happen to, I think, summarize how the mind works in a really, really good way. Best way I've ever seen, anyway. But yeah, so because we're living we're operating out of these from birth to death, there's so many opportunities to be able to help people steer them towards seeing, into how the mind works. And then when my clients jump on board with that, they have insight into that, everything changes for them. It's not always right away, but they'll say, wow, I came here to feel less depressed, but all of a sudden my relationships are better, and I'm working out more, and I mean, that might be an outcome of not being depressed too, but there's a ripple effect across life, because we show up in life, because we have these principles in operation.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, that there is that evolution that occurs as we consciously or not align more with the principles, and often it's not conscious, but if you really know that nothing outside of yourself, no event, no person, no situation has the power to run your mind. That power is always occurring within. Um, then it really changes where where you put your energy, what you put your attention on, where what you try and achieve in this life, because it becomes futile to say rail at the weather as I actually used to, which wasn't a great thing here in Scotland. But the weather's completely unpredictable and not particularly warm and sunny. But yeah. Um, yeah, so it is quite extraordinary. I had the just the experience recently. For me, it's been about 15 years since I stumbled across this, and it really is just quite extraordinary how much easier my life is. And also, as I look back on things, times of really great struggle and unhappiness, I can now see, without any need to beat myself up or anything, because I didn't know any better, but I can see, oh, so much of that pain was being internally generated innocently and unconsciously. I thought I was dealing with data, and actually I was terrifying myself with my own mind. And that just sort of doesn't make sense to me anymore. I mean, of course, thoughts can pop in and from time to time, but it just doesn't make sense to kind of go to the races with them, bet on every horse. um,
Another thing that sets us apart from maybe some more other ways of looking at the mind, in like traditional psychology, for example, um, or even coaching, is that it brings the spiritual back into mental life. Now, that's always a word I have to use cautiously with people, because some people have had bad experiences with religion, but it brings it's the formless and the form together. So it's the principles are formless, they're invisible, so we can only understand them through the intuitive mind, which brings us into that deeper space. And that's where insight comes from. It's not memory bound. It's not form. It's come from the formless. So that's another significant, because I think that, the psychology field, at least, it went, in a direction that was less effective when they went toward behavior and cognition only. Like even cognitive behavioral people think I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and sometimes I'll put that in a profile because people don't know what the principles are. But we talk a lot about thought, but even that is focused on the thoughts themselves and doing something with those thoughts, challenging those thoughts, wrangling with those thoughts, disagreeing with those thoughts, rather than just seeing that it is thought.
yes, exactly. And also that whole approach it kind of puts the ego in charge, and it's something that I find that clients who are sort of just often in the early stages, and they're getting a sense that there's something here, but that a question that often occurs is, yeah, so how do I change my thinking, and that's very much, I know you want a formula in form about how you could just roll this out and only experience the top half of the spectrum of feelings or something like that. And of course, there's something very different in here. It's like all our feelings are coming from within, and there's nothing wrong with any of them, especially if we're not knitting into the worst ones by cogitating in that and ruminating on that. But there is something of um it's not a tool for the ego to use. It seems to me that there is something of humility and something of there's something somewhat mystical, that um i- insights are universal, but they're not it's not insight on demand. It's reliable but not predictable, as one of our colleagues said on one occasion, and I like that phrase. there's and that's to my mind, that's actually a good thing. Just to that the that force of will and intellect and ego are not going to be where the answers are.
Right. Right.
And as you say, opening up a deeper part of ourselves, or being open to that.
And one of the challenges of being a mental health therapist, not as much a coach, because people come to me with coaching that are already kind of open to, I don't know. Anyway, I find it more with mental health therapy is that, they want, a lot of times, some people just want those 5 steps towards happiness, or strategies that they can bring home that will help them get along better with their spouse or their kids, or reduce stress, and part of my learning curve over the years has been ways to communicate, really listen to that, and also communicate in the best way that I can for that person in front of me, to ask them to be a little bit patient and kind of look over in this direction a little bit more, because um, the thing is, and what really helps, I think, people to know is that if I give you a strategy or some kind of technique to use to be less stressed or better communicator, well, you're going to always have to use that to get that result. And in my experience with human beings, those fall off. If I tell you to go meditate 5 days a week, that's going to last for a certain period of time, and it's going to fall off for most people. So if you have to rely on a technique to get the result, then you have to do the technique, and that's just not sustainable. But if you have an insight about the mechanics of the mind, and how stress happened for you, or how anger happens for you, or how insecurities in your marriage happen for you, if you have insight into that, well, that creates lasting change for people, because you see something, then you shift, and then you're operating from a different level. Operating Life doesn't even look the same. Like that first that I had, nothing looked the same to me after that. I remember it very clearly. I remember exactly where I was. I remember the lighting of the room. I remember where I was in my old apartment. It's funny how that works, but nothing was the same after that for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I had one of those really profound insights as well. Mine was to do with not being broken, which I had kind of thought was my diagnosis. But but in a sense, even those words don't do justice to the power of the shift. And what also came with it was a knowledge that I had found what I'd been searching for in my case many years of looking for peace and well-being, and just mental resilience. I knew that I'd found it somehow. I don't know how I knew, but I knew that this is it. And I can't fully articulate that or explain why, but um it isn't just with the benefit of hindsight that I see how profound the shift was.
So I guess in terms, having people understand this is, I often do a lot of groundwork in terms of, I'm just going to ask you to be patient with me, and we're going to be exploring something a little different than you might have explored in therapy before. And, if I have a good connection with them, then it turns out well. Not for everybody. So I'll say, I need to find something different. That's okay.
Yeah. um and I think that's fine. I mean, um because I think that sometimes people, for whatever reason, aren't kind of ready to go there. There is and that's really fine, and it's comforting to me that Sid Banks, who was the first person to see this and articulate it in this way, had that same experience. It's just I think it's very much about offer offer what you can, and if it's not wanted, fine, move on. Move on. And yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I love the way you have explained this, Mary, and I think you do have a gift for just putting this over in a way that's very simple and straightforward and comprehensible to people, and would draw people in. So I appreciate that, and that's one of the reasons I'm delighted that you're on the podcast today. Um, uh, uh, Obviously you're in America. I'm here in Scotland, and uh,
I was in
what?
Scotland.
Yeah, you've been in Scotland, yes. And what would you suggest to anyone who might be coming across this podcast and be intrigued by some of what we've discussed today? What are some of the first thoughts that you would share with someone who was keen to learn more?
I'm not sure what. Well, they could contact you or me.
Well, there's that. There's that. Yes, and you're just we might as well just mention there your website is Mary White Coaching or Coach.
No, it's oh yes, it is. It's Mary White Coaching.
Yeah,
MaryWhiteCoaching.com. Yeah, yeah.
and you do work with people online as well as in person. Is that right? My whole motivation for doing this is I feel I've discovered the holy grail here, and yet it's still the biggest secret in the world, and it's quite, it is difficult to articulate. I think, that because of the formless nature of the principles, and yet we're using language which is used elsewhere in a very different way, so there's confusion. And also I think we are becoming better, we being you and I and all of our colleagues, we are becoming better at describing it and sharing it. But I just think I'd love for it to go further, and I think people might listen to a podcast like this and think, well, okay, so what's my next move if I want to learn more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, contacting either one of us or explore Sydney Banks' works by yourself if you like to. Um, or, you and I both really are keen on Keith Blevins and Brett Chitty's work, through psychology. I think that they're really onto something in terms of sharing this. And I don't know what else to offer about that.
Yeah, there are resources. There are increasingly resources available on the internet more widely now than there were when I came into it, and I suppose when you came into it, there was no internet. Just
I would suggest that they don't look at the Reddit thread though. There's a Reddit thread on Google.
I'm not on Reddit.
But if you Google Three Principles or Sydney Banks, you might come up with some information out there, some debates about whether this is a cult or not, and all that kind of stuff. And it isn't, but
I suppose any cult might say that, but I think it can really easily be distinguished, because one of the essential um, aspects of this work is that, which I'm always saying to people I work with, and I'm sure you are too, is that you have the answers within you. It's not about anybody else giving you the answers. You just don't yet know how to consistently access those. And yeah, so it seems that's the antithesis of a cult to me. Hmm. Yeah. Although I did, one of my colleagues said that his partner had recently described to a mutual friend that David's involved in a cult, which I thought was unfortunate. Um, but I suppose, yes, I think that's just something that a term people can bandy around without there having any substance to it at all. But we're sort of coming towards the end of our time here. I really appreciate you making the time there. I know it's early morning in Minnesota, but I would love to give you an opportunity, if there's anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to share just now, or any closing remarks that you might have.
you know, I don't know what occurs to me more and more is the simplicity of this understanding. But it can be the simplicity can fool you because it is so simple once you see it, but it's not before you do. And and I mean that's true with anything, before you see something, you don't see it. So once you see it, it's ridiculously simple. But it's not simplistic, it's very profound and deep and life-changing and all-encompassing. The principles are universal, they're 100%. They explain all human behavior and all human experience. And so that's pretty vast. Because of their simplicity, it helped me simplify. I mean, I had a very complicated analytical mind, and every now and then I still get a little complicated in it, but I know it's me. And so I can't stay there like I used to. So when people come in and they're stressed and they have all these, they just list about 45 things that are going wrong in their lives, and they're stressed, and you can see that they're stressed, and they've been stressed, and they haven't been sleeping. It's because their life looks so complicated, and it isn't. I mean, we have lots of things to do. We have lots of things on our plate. The world is in a complicated state, but really the answer is simplicity. So every now and then I'm just like, oh, thank goodness I know this because I can come back to simplicity. I can come back to simplicity. I can come back to the moment, and then I have clarity, and I have all the goodies that are available to me, like common sense, wisdom, creativity, resilience, whatever I need in the moment will be there for me. So that's one of the beautiful things of working. I don't ever want to stop sharing this with people. I could retire. I'm nearing like the retirement age in the States, but I'm like, well, first of all, I can't. But second of all, I don't want to because to see people go from so complex and so overwrought and burdened to, oh my gosh, that's all it is pretty cool. But it's not but it's not simplistic. It's very deep.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Lovely, lovely. Well, thank you. I mean, that feels like a really good place to end it. And thank you so much for the conversation today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you. Thank you very much.